Welcome to PixelTunes Radio,
a podcast where we have fun
talking about video games
and video game music.
I'm Dogie Mike.
And I'm Adol Ed.
And this is episode 97 of PixelTunes Radio, Ys Retrospective Part 1. We are covering the first 4 games in the Ys series, and today marks a very special day because today Ys 8 is coming out, Lacrimosa of Dana, so we figured to celebrate the long-running series, let's do an episode on this series. Let's do an episode on this episode. Yeah,
it's the episode tribute episode.
Yes. Tribute.
Yeah, so I have a lot of fondness for Ys 3, Wanderers from Ys.
Same here.
Specifically on the Super Nintendo. Yep. The other games in the series I really haven't touched at all.
Oh, really?
So This was kind of a learning experience for me to kind of go in and research the composers and the music and such. So I learned a lot putting this episode together. Mm-hmm. I haven't really played many of the other games, so a lot of the stuff I'll kind of be commenting probably more on the music than gameplay. So right. How much of the Ys series have you played?
Similar to you, I started off with Wanderers from Ys 3, or Ys 3, whatever you want to call it.
Ys 3 Wanderers from Ys.
Ys 3 Wanderers from Ys, yeah. And that was the first experience that I had with it. I rented the game just on a whim, and it was so difficult, and I couldn't get past the Tigray quarry. Yeah, I just could not beat it. And, as the years went on, I got a little bit better at the game, but I still want to go back and finish it. So I have a lot of nostalgia for the game, despite the fact that I haven't gotten very far in it.
It's funny, what made me want to go out and rent the game was in Nintendo Power, in the classified section, they released the button combination you push for the debug mode, which included invincibility, but also a sound test. And it got really good reviews, especially for the music in Nintendo Power. And I was like, oh, good music. So both that and the invincibility code. So I rented it, went through the sound test, recorded all the music, put it on tape. So it was one of my childhood soundtracks that I had on my tape player. Right. And then also kind of was able to go through a lot of the game because I tried going through the game. Right. Like same as you. It was nearly impossible for somebody who's just starting out with that game. So, I plugged in the invincibility code and I romped through it, and I think I ended up beating it. I'm not sure. There was a level select and invincibility and all this stuff that you could do with it.
That's really cool.
Played around with the game for a bit. I didn't end up buying it afterwards, but did, kind of go back to it once ROM started coming out and played it again.
I jumped around quite a bit. I mean, Ys kind of disappeared at that point, at least from North American shores. Yeah. We really only got Wanderers from Ys, and then it disappeared. But we ended up getting Ys, I believe it's 6, which is Ark of Napishtim. Right. And that came out on the PlayStation 2 and the PSP, if I recall. And
they did really well, so they started bringing them more and more out over here.
Yeah, so that is the other game that I have a little bit of experience with as well. I really, really like that game too, and that's what kind of got me back into checking out the series. What's interesting is I knew that these games had really fantastic soundtracks, but then I found out that Ys 1 and 2 also had Famicom versions, and those soundtracks I downloaded and completely fell in love with. So those are some of my favorite Famicom-based soundtracks ever. So
they are pretty darn good.
Yeah, we're going to touch on that in just a bit.
So a little bit of top of the show business before we get into the music. We just wanted to remind you guys that we are going to be at Retro World Expo October 14th and 15th in Hartford, Connecticut at the Convention Center there. We are definitely going to be there. For all you other VGM podcast fans, Emily from the VGM Jukebox will be joining us, as well as Rob and Pernell from Rhythm and Pixels.
Right.
There's going to be a ton of other YouTuber guests there as well. Pixel Dan, the gaming historian. Yep. I don't know who else is going to be there.
Me. Guys. This will actually be the first time that I'm labeled as a guest, which is really cool.
Very cool.
Pretty awesome. So yeah, I will have a separate panel as well if I recall, but I'm not 100%. We'll know 100% when we get closer to the date.
Yes.
But we should be potentially having a panel for PixelTunes as well. It's going to be pretty awesome.
Well, yeah, not just a PixelTunes panel, but a VGM podcast panel.
Right.
So 3 members of all 3 podcasts, VGM Jukebox, Rhythm and Pixels, and PixelTunes Radio, will be there live, jamming out to some tunes and getting some audience participation.
Yes.
So, if you're in the Hartford area, if you want to come down, go to retroworldexpo.com and you
book
can
your tickets.
Grab your tickets. And they're not very expensive to get in either. So.
No, it's I think like maybe $40 for the weekend pass or something.
Less than 40 for both days.
Yeah, or something like 50. I don't know. But
tons of retro gamers, vendors, and free play arcade.
Awesome
food,
stuff.
Crafts, you name it.
Yep. I would say that for those of you who are fond of our Halloween episodes, you will definitely be very happy with the panel.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. No more secrets.
No more secrets.
You're spoiling it.
I'm spoiling everything. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I want people to come out, man.
All right, so let's get to some Pixel Chat questions.
Sounds good.
Hooray!
What do we got?
First Pixel Chat question is from our pal Niko the WiiGuy.
Whoa. It's Niko, a.k.a. the WiiGuy. You have to throw in that a.k.a.
Because.
Don't forget that.
So Niko writes, "Hey, it's been a while. After just listening recently to Fallen Back in Time 2, it really hits home how the Fallen brothers are one of the masters of the NES console sound chip. And it's sad to see, going basically into the disc era, consoles lose the feeling that certain composers rocked with sound chips of limited hardware. So much like how Rob Hubbard and Euro and Tel are considered masters of the C64 and Alberto Jose Gonzalez for the Game Boy, aside from the Fallen brothers, who do you think also understood and really got the feel of the NES sound?"
Whew, that's a tough one.
Well, I'd say all of our favorite composers, you know?
Yeah,
I think the first person that came to my mind was Neil Baldwin.
Okay.
Because he is definitely one of those guys that even had a blog that kind of explains the NES sound hardware. He really knew it through and through well enough to be able to teach it out just in text and have people understand it. Plus, his music was absolutely incredible. He had this unique, very slow, very emotional style that a lot of the other composers didn't really experiment with on the NES, and just made some very mature, very deep-sounding NES music. I think he really, really got that hardware.
I'm going to say any of the Natsume. I think that they really knew their stuff, and I mean, just in talking to Eiichi Mizutani, we learned so much about how Japanese game composers worked on the music. And, you know, when we got the answers from him on the episode where we featured an interview with him that we did, it really broke down, like, how the individual music is, how the sounds are made in, like, independent from the music, and how they have to factor in sound effects with the music.
Right.
So that was really informative. So you kind of have to know your stuff if you're going to be talking about that. So I would imagine that Mizutani and the rest of the Natsume clan, Konami, all the Konami composers, they all knew like the hardware limitations and what they could and couldn't do. And I think as they grew more familiar with the sound chip, they were able to do just these insane things with the NES.
Sure, and especially Mizutani as a sound director and a sound manager, you know, he has to know that stuff, because when he brings composers on that are new to the system, he has to be able to teach them out, and he has to be able to correct their errors like he was talking about. That requires a much deeper understanding than your average composer would have.
Agreed.
All right, so what's our next question?
Next question comes to us from Chris Murray, and he asks, "What is the most overrated game of all time in your opinion? Meaning either a game that seems to have the adoration of almost everyone, but you just hate it, or a game that's become a blockbuster that you think is just crap being pushed on a generation of gamers who just don't know any better."
Wow, that's some harsh language.
Woof.
I wouldn't go that far.
Goodness. You know, game enjoyment is subjective to the player.
Right.
Like, what I like isn't the same as what anybody else is going to like. There's two that I would say that come to mind off the top of my head. One is Kingdom Hearts. I don't get it. I've played it. It's really bad. Like, I really disliked playing Kingdom Hearts.
Millions of PixelTune listeners just turned off. I don't think we've ever played a Kingdom Hearts song on our show.
And there's good reason. I'm sure the music is fine.
Yeah.
But the gameplay is terrible. I just couldn't get behind it. And I like action RPGs, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I remember I was playing the not demo, but like when you first get into a game and they're teaching you how to play the game.
Yeah.
And I remember like being on top of palm trees and trying to figure out how to platform, and it was just a disaster. And I was like, nope, I'm good. Nope. Tapping out. The other one, Ed's gonna kill me for this, but Earthbound.
Dun, dun, dun.
The Mother series, I don't get it. I'm not personally a fan. The music is really good. Like, there's some really phenomenal tracks in there.
Yeah.
I think the characters are boring. I think the art style's lame. I think that maybe the gameplay's okay. I don't know. I played it for 15 minutes, and I, no joke, fell asleep playing it. Like, I wasn't even playing it late at night. I got it for free on the Virtual Console as part of like a Club Nintendo thing.
Yep.
And I'm like, all right, let me try it out and start playing. And just 15 minutes in, I was like, just out, man.
Totally understand.
I don't get it.
It's one of those games that, I think a lot of people love it because it's so expensive. Like,
maybe.
It's just one of those collector's items that people seek after and they want to kind of justify their purchase by saying it's awesome. Mm-hmm. I mean, personally, I didn't buy it. I just played the ROM, but I do really love it. And I loved it even before it was like one of those must-get collector's items kind of games.
Right,
but,
right.
It's like different strokes for different folks. I guess, overrated games. The E series, of course. No, I'm just kidding.
Ouch.
No, Dark Souls, the whole Souls series. Okay. People go crazy over them. I tried. I spent like 2 hours with Dark Souls 3, and I just couldn't. Just couldn't. It's so frustrating, and I just had no idea what I was doing. And I would get to a place where I could save, and then I would get really far, and I'd play for like 45 minutes to an hour, and I would die before getting the next save point and have to start all over again. I was just like, this is not...
That's frustrating.
It's not a game for a person like me who has maybe an hour or less to play every night. 7 hours a week at that.
Sure.
So I was like, no, I'm done. I can't do this. So, but people really, really enjoy the game, and I probably figured that if you have a lot of time to spend on playing it, you would probably get good at it, and then you would enjoy it. But
yeah.
But not for me. I just don't understand.
We also don't have as much time as younger people, too.
Yeah.
And that's something to take account of, because, I mean, you have a family, you have a wife, you have, responsibilities, you have, kids and all that stuff. Plus, you work a full-time job.
Yep. And do 2 podcasts.
Right. And I do all the stuff that I do on YouTube, the podcast that we do.
Lick your Samus statues.
Yeah, licking my Samus statues at least 12 times a week. I mean, And so, I'm married and I have a social life. And, we're all really, really busy. And I work a full-time job outside of this. So it's kind of like one of those things where we just
too
don't
busy
have
for
the
Dark
time.
Souls.
Yeah.
Busy.
We're just too busy for games, really, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true.
We just need to find a time machine, go back, bring all these games to our 16-year-old selves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Here, sit down and play these.
Yeah.
16, no.
No?
Maybe 12.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I had no time when I was 16.
No?
No.
Okay.
Ladies' man.
Oh, ladies' man. Oh. Well then.
Anyhow, thank you, Chris, for that question. Next question is from Ben Dishman, the Dyad, from the Dyad Presents a VGM podcast. And he asks, I was going to ask, what's your favorite underwater level in a game? But maybe a better question is, are there any good underwater levels in games?
I think that the Ninja Turtles dam level gets a lot of hate.
Yeah, I really enjoy that level.
I like playing that level.
And the Mario underwater levels have been fun.
Yeah. Like
They're
Mario
hit and miss,
3 has some great underwater levels. They're all, for the most part, really enjoyable. Most of the Mario games do. Even Sonic, I usually have fun with the Sonic levels underwater. I don't know if there's any games where... I mean, aside from the Water Temple and Zelda Ocarina of Time, that's really the only thing that I can think of as far as underwater levels. Oh, what's a pain in the butt underwater level? Vector Man. There's that.
I don't think I've ever played that.
You never played Vector Man at all, or?
I've never gotten to that point. I played Vector Man.
Okay. So there's a underwater level. It's kind of like, if I recall, like a Frozen underwater level, and it is just a huge pain in the butt. It's a giant maze, but it's not like Turtles, where it's like there's very limited places that you can go.
Cool. Yeah, I never really liked the Sonic underwater levels, because it's just Sonic but slow.
Yeah, okay.
And then you need to get those water bubbles, and that music really kind of gives you a heart attack.
Oh, the right.
Just stop. So cool. Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Niko, Chris, and Ben, for those awesome Pixel Chat questions. Please feel free to leave us your Pixel Chat questions at pixeltunesradio@gmail.com, and we will answer them on the show in a future episode.
That's right. So let's jump right into it. Our first game is Ys 1, Ancient Ys Vanished. Came out on the PC-88 in 1987. The first track that Ed has picked is The Morning Grow. And just so you guys know, as far as how this went down, as far as how we're going to break this down. 4 games. Ed picked 2 tracks from the first game. I picked 1 track from the first game. And then same thing for the third episode.
We're just going to alternate back and forth, basically.
And then Ys 2 and Ys 4, I picked 2 tracks and Ed picked 1. So that's how we're going to do it. So Ed's first pick is The Morning Grow. This is the PC-88 version of that track. Came out in 1987. It's by Yuzo Koshiro, Meiko Ishikawa, Masaya Hashimoto, and Takehito Abe.
And we're back. That was The Morning Grow, which I want to say is probably a mistranslation for The Morning Glow.
No. Nope. I refuse to believe it.
Which nobody bothered to realize. But that was from Ys 1, Ancient Ys Vanished, the original PC-88 version, which came out in 1987, composed by Yuzo Koshiro and Meiko Ishikawa, with assistance from Masaya Hashimoto and Takehito Abe. I felt this was a really good track to bring in the episode.
Agreed.
With. It's just got a very nice heroic story feel. It kind of sets the mood for the whole Ys series with a really nice kind of basic FM sound production going on. I mean, what'd you think of it?
Yeah, no, I think that this is a good track to kind of introduce everybody to this series. I don't necessarily think this is my favorite off of the soundtrack.
No.
But it is a good opener, definitely. This must take place early in the game, too. Like,
yeah.
You know, probably during some sort of story or something like that. I like that strong bass tone, the dung, dung.
Yeah.
Like, when it kind of hammers in.
You hear
really
a lot
good.
of that in the Ys series, too.
Yeah.
And, you know, what you get in the Ys series, because Falcom concentrates so much on, you know, the musicality of their games, you hear, like, traditional, like, RPG-style town music. You get some really, really rockin' tunes. You get some kind of almost frightening and terrifying songs. Mm-hmm. There's so much genre blending and different sound styles that you get throughout the whole Ys soundtrack series. I think we did a really good blend of like almost every kind of music that you hear throughout the first 4 games.
No, I agree. I mean, we've got everything from, you know, introduction type music like this, shopkeep music, you know, kind of like introductions to the game, but also we have some really awesome like field and fight songs that you'll hear throughout the dungeons and whatnot.
Exactly.
So really good stuff. I mean, overall the Ys series is just fantastic for music. So you guys really need to buckle in because you're going to get your faces blown off.
And the cool thing about the Ys series is that from at least a soundtrack perspective is that they became so popular, Falcom ported them to so many different systems.
Yep.
So you have kind of a Ys soundtrack for every game, at least like the first 3 games. Mm-hmm. You have an Ys soundtrack for every taste. You know, if you like PSG the best, you've got your PSG version. If you like FM the best, you got your FM version.
Yep.
So between like the 88, the PC-98, the X1, it came out on the FM7, the MSX2, Famicom, the Master System, DOS, and the X68000.
So many systems.
Like, pick your favorite flavor of chip
sound
tune.
chip, right.
Right, and you've got it there. So all you need is like a sample-based system like the Amiga or the SNES, and you have a full round palette there of different soundtracks to choose from. But that said, I do really think that a lot of the FM soundtracks for the Yi series kind of shine a little bit over their PSG counterparts. But, you can make your own decision as we go through the show.
Definitely, and you'll be able to hear all different styles of the soundtrack. We didn't necessarily stick with one in particular. We kind of bounced all over the place. We picked some stuff that maybe doesn't sound as, I guess, iconic as some of the other stuff. There's so much debating. I mean, I was on listening to some of the music to prepare for this podcast, and you're going through the YouTube videos and seeing the comments, and you got anything from "this is amazing" to "this is terrible."
Yeah.
The PC-88 version's way better. Oh, the Super NES version's the best.
There are a lot of fanboys.
Tons of fanboys and tons of people who have very strong opinions. And just, you got to keep in mind that it's all subjective to what you're into. Right. We tried to pick that really, eclectic mix that we think you guys will really dig. So
for sure. So
what about the composers?
Well, the composers, I mean, we've talked about at least some of them before. So Yuzo Koshiro, we did a whole episode on back in episode 16. Obviously, the Genesis stuff, Streets of Rage, ActRaiser, The Scheme, Misty Blue on the PC-88, 98.
Wangan Midnight
series. Vlat Vla, goes on and on, so definitely check out our back history of Yuzo Koshiro tracks if you want to hear more from him. Meiko Ishikawa joined Nihon Falcom in 1987. This was the first game she ever worked on.
Oh, wow.
She became a huge name at Falcom as part of their JDK outfit. So she's done stuff from the Sorcerian series, Popful Mail, the Legend of Heroes series. She retired from music in 1997, so she only composed for about a decade. But now she serves on the board of directors at Nihon Falcom, so she makes a lot of business decisions and directs the way the company goes, which is a shame. She did come back to do a little bit of composition, I think, on it was like a PSP or a PS Vita remake of something in like the Legend of Heroes series or something.
Oh, okay.
She did a little bit of work, but then, it was kind of just like a, special guest star, Meiko Ishikawa kind of a deal, and then she went back to her desk and started signing papers again. Masaya Hashimoto was credited for music, but he was the game's lead programmer and designer. So a lot of sites list him as the sound staff, but then other ones don't. I mean, I know that Yuzo Koshiro and Meiko Ishikawa were the primary composers, so perhaps he helped on sound effects or just a little bit of sound direction with the game. And Takahito Abe, again, was like an artist and a programmer as well, so I guess they kind of dipped their fingers in sound a little bit, but that wasn't their primary focus as far as game design goes.
So Takahito Abe, I think, also worked on...
the SNES game, Hagane.
Right, yeah. Okay. So, Hagane has pretty good music.
Yeah. I think he was a co-composer on that, so he might have done some sound design as well. So,
all right. Well, let's jump into the next track. What do you say?
Sure.
All right. So I picked the Tower of the Shadow of Death, and this is the TurboGrafx CD version of this. Came out in 1990. Welcome back. That was Tower of the Shadow of Death.
Sounds friendly.
Yeah, really friendly. TurboGrafx CD version of Ys 1, and that came out in 1990. Let me tell you a little something about the Tower of the Shadow of Death. This part of the game takes place when you're in this tower, and it is a huge maze labyrinth type thing. It has these weird rooms that have these corridors that you have to go into. You go in the door and it spits you out somewhere else, right, in the room. And you've got to figure out how to get where you need to be so you can go outside of the tower, and then it's a spiral staircase that goes around.
Right.
But the problem is, it doesn't go up or down, it just spins in a circle. So you have absolutely no clue where you are. You pretty much have to constantly keep going into the map to look to see where you are, and then to go back. It is such a pain in the butt.
Kind of like that tower at the end of Battletoads, where you're outside it, and you're like in a static position, but the tower, it's following you. So based on the music, rough. I would expect the interior of the tower to have like neon geometric shapes on the wall, and like guys with like 3D sunglasses, and
not so much.
It's very, very 80s sounding.
It is. Especially in the beginning, it kind of sounds like a workout video. You know what I mean? Because you got that yeah. But the part that always kind of like grinds my gears, like, great track. I love this track. I picked this track, so don't get me wrong, it's a good track. But the part that always grinds my gears is the part that sounds like a record is skipping. So the part that's just like da 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 da. Yeah, and it's not necessarily the fact that the time signature changes. It's more that just keeps looping, and it loops a little too long. And when you're going around this maze, it just gets so infuriating to listen to the song at points, because you're like, get out of my head. But then I love when the guitar comes in at this part, when it's just like, because it's so noodly, but it's also kind of like math metal, because it just doesn't know what it wants to be. The time signatures are all over the place. It's just like widdly squiddly, just.
You've got like the horns and the synth and the bass and the guitar. They're all kind of doing something different at the same time. So, it all blends together very well, but the song gets a little busy at times. And I would assume, playing in a maze-like level, that just contributes to the confusion that you're experiencing in the game.
It is pretty mind-numbing. I got Ys 1 and 2. The very first time I ever played it was on the Wii Virtual Console when it came out. It was released on... That was like one of the first TurboGrafx CD games that they had on the Wii.
Like that and Rondo of Blood, I think, were the first two.
Yeah, and so I was like, I have to get this. Like, I at that point only was familiar with Wanderers from Ys and Ys 6, Oath of Felghana. So I was like, all right, well, let me see where this series kind of kicked off. And it's funny because I was playing it, a friend of mine was watching, and as we're playing, he's like, this game graphically is not that impressive, but holy crap, the music is amazing. He's like, they put all the budget into the music.
Yeah.
And we were laughing about it because it's kind of true. Like, when you think of the Ys series, you don't necessarily think gameplay first, you think music first.
Yeah, as far as, us being soundtrack fanatics, that would be the kind of the way. However, this was like one of the first TurboGrafx CD games ever released.
Yeah.
So that full motion video, those anime cut sequences, those were all extremely impressive back then. Nobody's ever seen anything like that before. So they look kind of dated now, of course, because it's just early CD stuff, but back then people were like completely wild. Like a Happy Console Gamer did a review of the first three Ys games.
He's a huge
Ys fan, and he describes playing this for the first time after experiencing the Sega Master System version, and just how blown away he was by the game. So I can imagine that most gamers felt the same way.
Yeah, check out his channel. He's if you're at all into Ys, he's like a super fan.
Yeah, he's very knowledgeable about it too. So
you
absolutely. Learn a lot.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to mention really quick before we go into a little bit of the plot behind the Ys series. The arranger for the TurboGrafx CD version is Ryo Yonemitsu, and you're going to hear his name pop up probably a few times throughout this podcast. He's mainly like a CD arranger guy for Falcom. He worked on the arrangements for Ys 3 Wanderers from Ys, Dragon Slayer The Legend of Heroes 1 and 2, Ys for the Dawn of Ys, he did the music arrangement for the CD version, and then Tokimeki Memorial 2, like an extra like Omaki disc or something for that. But outside of video games, you'll find him mostly on Falcom's extra arrangement discs. So extra arrangements of tons of games that they've put out. Like I want to say like 70 to 85% of the stuff they've put out that was in the from the JDK section of their music group. You're going to find Ryo Yonemitsu's name somewhere as far as either arrangement or performance, or he's just one of those guys that excels more in live instrumentation than like programming chiptunes and stuff.
Right.
But we'll hear some of the credits from him as we go throughout the show.
Definitely. So tell me about the story in this game. I haven't played this in a couple years, so...
Well, the Ys series focuses on a character named Adol Christin. And he's this little red-haired dude. He looks more like a traditional anime character nowadays, but before he was just this very nondescript guy with some red armor and red hair. He's just a very red character.
Except when they screwed him up on the Wanderers from Ys game, I think, on the CD, on the TurboGrafx CD. Didn't they screw him up and they made him like some blonde... long-haired blonde guy or something like that?
But there was a cutscene where they mistranslate. It was like Adol's ancestor from way back then. In a cutscene at the beginning of the game, they call him Adol. But then when you actually start playing as Adol, he looks red hair. He's got the normal look. Yeah.
Right.
So anyways, in this first story, Adol sets out for adventure, hearing about some mysterious disturbances on this island called Asteria. The island is surrounded by this storm barrier. He decides he's going to go anyway and check it out. Ship ends up capsizing. He wakes up on the shore.
Pretty common reoccurrence in the series.
Yeah, he does that a lot. He's a very bad sailor.
Yes.
Excellent adventurer, very bad sailor.
Very bad sailor.
So he meets Sarah, who's a fortune teller and a descendant of the priest Toba, and she tells him that he needs to find the Books of Ys. And so he finds 3 of them and climbs up this tower, which is where we hear this music that's playing. And then he needs to use some magical metal to defeat the main baddie of the game. His name is Dark Fact. I don't know why they call him Dark Fact, but whatever. So he collects all 6 Books of Ys, which is what the fortune teller told him to do. And that pretty much bridges the gap directly into the second game, in which he actually visits the mystical and fabled land of Ys. But before we get into that, we've got one more Ys 1 track to play.
Yes, what did you pick?
This one is called First Step Toward Wars. This is from the Sega Master System version of the game, which came out in 1988. Alright, that was First Step Towards Wars from Ys 1, The Vanished Omens. That was the Sega Master System port, which came out in 1988, and that was arranged by Izuho Takeuchi and Tokuhiko Uwabo.
This track, I don't know, it feels like it's missing something, and I always feel that way about Master System songs. Of course. There's always just something that I feel like it just is missing something.
Well, the song has some pitch problems.
Yep.
It's a heroic song, but on that very dour sounding, Master System 3 square wave and a noise channel kind of deal, and it struggles. It tries really hard to feel upbeat and happy, but it's like do 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 do. It's.
I wish you guys could see the face that Ed just made. It was like an orc or a dwarf climbed into his mouth and was protruding
That was my subtext.
Oh,
now
really?
You ruined it for everybody.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I like the composition. I like it was a good arrangement, based on the hardware that they were working with. And the Sega Master System version was the version that a lot of people experienced
for the first time here. Yeah, definitely.
So I wanted to kind of give that some recognition that this is one of the most popular versions of the game that's out there. Did the NES version ever come out here, or was it just Famicom only?
Yes.
Yeah. So US people, you either had the Master System version, or you had to go with the TurboGrafx CD version.
Right.
And there were far more people with the Master System than there were with Turbo CD. So
yeah. Ys 2 never came out in the States aside from TurboGrafx, I believe.
That was 1 and 2 on the same disc.
Right.
So Ys Books 1 and 2 was the official title of that.
Yep. So, I guess as far as the combat goes...
Bumping and grinding.
There you go. That's a good one.
Yeah, there's a battle system where the fighters automatically attack when walking into each other, so you get into this overhead map, you see an enemy walking around on the map, and you basically just run headlong into them.
Yeah.
And depending on where your sprite lines up with the enemy sprite, that tells you whether you do damage or not. And I remember we were talking about this on our TurboGrafx PC Engine episode that we did a while ago, and there was that game that was just a direct rip-off of the first Ys game. And we tried playing it a little bit, and we were like, I don't know what we're doing. And then one of our listeners chimed in and was like, oh, it's the bump system, similar to Ys, and we kind of learned about how that worked.
Right.
So when one fighter crashes into an enemy, damage could be sustained on both sides if both combatants are facing each other directly. If you attack straight on, it causes the attacker the most damage to himself. If you just clip the edge of him, the defender causes the attacked fighter to take most or all of the damage.
That's what she said.
Yeah. And if one fighter crashes into the enemy's side or back, only the attacked fighter will sustain damage. So you want to get in the back door, or you want to spoon him.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't want the missionary position.
No.
You want back door or spoon.
Right.
Those are the hard-hitting attack points.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what's really gonna make you
thrust effectively.
Come to understand the game better.
Yes.
Yes.
You will always get to the climax if you spoon or attack the back door.
Okay, so I will say that these early Ys games, especially 3, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, have very steep learning curves as far as the gameplay. When I first started playing this one, because I never played Ys 2, I couldn't beat Ys 1. I got pretty far. I got to that tower that I told you about that I had... Actually, I did recently... Not replay it, but I did recently pick my game back up and was like,
you just put it back
where am I? Yeah. I was like, where am I? And I had to pull up a map on GameFAQs. I had to.
Yeah, of course.
I couldn't
That's justified when
out.
You've been away from it for that long.
Yeah,
so.
I couldn't figure out how to do it, but I finally beat that dungeon, and then they were like, great, you got the book. Now you gotta go all the way back down the tower.
Word.
And I'm like, oh god, forget this.
If I die, do I start at the beginning again?
Yeah, right.
Just jump off the tower.
No. What's really cool about this game is that you can save anywhere too.
Right.
So that really helps because it in these games I tend to notice that you got to kind of inch your way towards beating the game, and you die a lot. Like, I don't know anybody who's played these games and it's like, yeah, man, I could one-hit kill it. I'm sure there's people out there that can do it.
Those people are insane.
Those people are masochists. I couldn't do it personally, but yeah. But they're fun. Like, once you get an understanding of how the gameplay works and the combat works, it's pretty fun.
I'll take your word for it. I haven't played it, so
it's worth checking out. Especially,
yeah. I mean, I've seen reviews and people really do seem to enjoy it. And as long as you can get a hang of that bump system, and you're okay with playing an RPG where you're not relying so much on your own reflexes to attack enemies or turn-based combat or anything like that.
Right.
As long as you get good at that bump system, which is kind of like just one singular skill that you need to really use to be able to play through this game, you'll do pretty well. I've heard that once you get the hang of them, they're really not that difficult.
Yeah, there's a bit of a grind too with it, just because you do have to level up your character, and the more guys you defeat, the more experience you get.
That's the bumping and grinding.
That's right. Just don't bump and grind if you've got some strange bumps. Because then,
right.
You might...
That could cause... syphilis.
You might get a disease. Ease. Get it?
Yeah.
I made a joke, Edward.
Table flip.
Oh,
you're off
all
the
right.
podcast.
Ys 2. Ancient Ys Vanished. The final chapter is our second game in this retrospective. This first came out on the PC-88 in 1988, and the music is by Yuzo Koshiro, Meiko Ishikawa, Hideo Nagata, and the TurboGrafx CD arrangement is by Ryo Yonemitsu we're actually going to listen to a Famicom track, and this is To Make the End of Battle.
Welcome back. That was To Make the End of Battle, performed by the 8-bit sprite versions of Godsmack.
What?
That beginning, it's like Egyptian metal, like kind of like Godsmack, kind of like like that Arabian like sound that they kind of have sometimes.
I could hear that.
So that's what I got out of it. But again, this is a very different sound than the last three tracks that we played. Kind of demonstrates that a lot of the battle music that you hear in the series, especially like going forward into ES3, you get some really like awesome kind of metal style tracks,
like dance metal, or like just really awesome like wailing guitars. There's a lot of different types of genres that kind of blend together, but this is just straight up awesome Japanese action music. I mean, you could easily hear this in any like Natsume game, Mega Man type of game. Oh yeah,
something like Shadow Hand or Shadow of the Ninja. I could totally hear this playing.
Absolutely, yeah. So just knock your socks off. I love the end right before the loop, just like that last like maybe 10 to 15 seconds,
the little squealies,
and then they bump it up with an additional like slightly different octave, and then it's just that so good.
And my favorite part, of course, is opposite of yours. I really like that Arabian flavored part at the beginning where it's a little slower and a little chuggier.
But the bass, I think we could both agree that the bass, the do 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 do, and then it's just like do 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 do. It's just, it's so punk, like punk rock. It's awesome. Good stuff.
Yes, for sure.
So the composers on this one, Hideo Nagata, also credited as Yu, and they were a music programmer for Space Harrier in 1987. Not the composer, but the programmer. Also worked on Bosconian Draken. He did the FM Towns version of Flashback.
Interesting.
And he did the OSTs for Fighters Destiny 1 and 2. Yeah, I dig this track. It's good stuff. And just this whole entire Famicom soundtracks. If you like the Famicom and you want to hear these tracks done without the FM synth that you'll hear from the PC-88 or the anything else that you're going to hear it on the MSX2, anything like that, definitely recommend checking out the Famicom if you are a fan of those soundtracks. The games themselves, I don't think are playable. They may have been translated, like fan translated, in recent years. Yeah, but the music is just incredible. It's all really high energy, fast-paced stuff, just like this. So let's check out your track. What do you got for us?
Next up is a track from the TurboGrafx CD version. This is Moat of Burned Bless, arranged by Ryo Yonemitsu.
All right, welcome back. That was Ed's pick, Mote of Burned Bless. And that was the TurboGrafx CD version of that track. Came out in 1990. That was definitely an Ed track, I will say that. I got that kind of like swampy vibe from this, the dun-dun-dun, almost like jungle tribal drums.
Yeah. A little bit of funk in there too with that bass like dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun.
Right.
Yeah, I really like this one. I mean, those drums are huge and very thick and heavy. Those snares are just those gigantic 80s snares that like you hear in like, a Phil Collins Genesis song or something like that. I needed to say Phil Collins because if I said Genesis song, you'd just think I was talking about the console, of course.
Right.
With the horn stabs and everything just comes together for this really, really cool sound. And you got to hear it or listen to it with the ears of like, this is one of the first ever CD audio soundtracks to a video game.
True.
And it's so impressive just for that, being that young and that technology. It's kind of just like, regular synths. Like, they didn't do anything special. There's not too much live instrumentation going on there. But I think Ryo Yonemitsu really had a good handle on how to take these, chip tunes from the Master System and, like, the really, really basic FM chip and the PC-88 and just make them come alive with these fantastic arrangements that sounded really good on a CD.
When they took advantage of the CD audio, they really kind of brought something special to the music. And the arrangement here is just really strong. I especially really like right before the loop, you hear that like little bass solo.
That's fantastic.
That was really good. So that really stood out to me.
And of course, when you're working with music written by Meiko Ishikawa and Yuzo Koshiro, like, you've got fantastic material to start with already. So I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of assisted him with the arrangements, like, this is what I was imagining when I created this, or, just gave him some input as far as what the sound should be like.
I kind of feel like the work that they did on the first game kind of set the tone for what the soundtracks for the rest of the series would sound like.
Yeah.
Very similar to the first Castlevania game, which was composed by Kinyo Yamashita and Satoe Terashima. It kind of sets the standard for what the tone should sound like for the rest of the series. And so that kind of happened with Ys as well. I feel like the work with that Meiko Ishikawa and Yuzo Koshiro did kind of set the tone.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So regarding the story, this one picks up right after Ys 1, which we just talked about a little while ago. And essentially what happens is Adol is transported to the island of Ys, where he is rescued by a woman named Lilia? Or Lilia? I think it's Lilia.
I call her Lilia.
Yeah. She takes him to her village, where he learns that he needs to take on the source of evil, which is called the Black Pearl. And out of the Black Pearl spawned this villain named Darm.
These villain names.
Darm.
Dark Fact and Darm.
Darm. I stubbed my toe. Darm.
Yeah.
I don't know. Silly names. So, yeah, he kind of spawned from the Pearl, and so you gotta take him out.
Wasn't the Black Pearl the name of the ship in, like, Pirates of the Caribbean?
I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was Curse of the Black Pearl or something.
Right,
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you didn't know that those games, that the East games
Jack Sparrow and Adol are, like, best buds?
Oh, definitely. Totally. Yeah. They raided and pillaged together.
Fantastic.
Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I haven't finished this. Well, I haven't started this one until I beat the first one, so it's kind of a to-be
Right.
continued.
On the TurboGrafx CD version, it's not like you can choose to play Ys 1 or Ys 2.
Right.
You have to basically play them in order. It basically blends the two stories together, which is
Yeah.
the way they should be anyway, because, like
Agreed.
I said, they are a direct continuation off of one another.
Absolutely. All right, well, my last pick for this game is Palace of Solomon, and we're going to continue with the TurboGrafx CD version. This came out in 1990, and this is a great track. Take a listen. Welcome back. That was Palace of Solomon. TurboGrafx CD version of the game came out in 1990. What do you think of that track?
Well, my first thought was I love how Yonemitsu ends all of these CD tracks, because it's like, it's the normal song and da-da-da-da-da, and then he's like, da-da-da,
yeah,
like, song's over.
Or like, ba-ba-ba. That's it.
Which is great. I mean, I guess he understands that the songs are going to be looping as you're playing, so he doesn't want to have this big kind of flourishing finale, because it's going to sound kind of awkward when the same song starts back up again.
Right.
But I did really like this track. I mean, this is a great example of like a lot of the heroic themes that you hear throughout the Ys series.
Absolutely.
The theme of Adol is like the most popular song from the series, which I think we've also played. The Boys Got Wings, which is from Ys 3, which is kind of a take on the original theme of Adol, which is my favorite theme from the whole series. We've played that on a previous episode.
Yes.
This kind of feels a lot like that, and I probably imagine that this song plays, while Adol's in the field or, fighting against enemies, some sort of...
I think it takes place in the Palace of Solomon.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's called the Palace of Solomon?
Yeah. Just a slight hint.
Maybe.
Possibly. No, I agree. I think that this is, again, one of those like awesome Japanese action music type of songs, and you really get that heroic feel listening to this track. It's solid stuff. So gameplay-wise, Ys 2 returns to the same bump and grind style, as you like to call it.
Yes.
Bump style gameplay as the first game in the series. And however, magic spells are now added into the mix. So Adol can acquire up to 7 of these. And bosses cannot be defeated, however, with the bump system. Aside from, I believe, only 2 of them can be hurt with the bump style. The rest of them have to be killed with magic spells.
I think that's a great addition, because, the bumping from the first game, a lot of reviewers said that it got really stale after a while. You're just attacking the same thing. There's no depth to that gameplay. Right. So with the addition of these magical spells, now you've got different magic, having different effects on different type of enemies. You have the ability to heal yourself. So it really adds a lot of gameplay into the game. So I feel like that would kind of freshen things up a little bit after, especially if you're playing like Ys Books 1 and 2 on the TurboGrafx CD, and you're kind of going right from one game into the other game.
Right.
They kind of blended into the storyline too, where now you're on the island of Ys, which is like a magical island. So now magic exists in this world, whereas before you were just in Asteria, which is just kind of, the quote-unquote normal world. So magic may not have existed there. So
true.
So it's very, very cool. Very good way to kind of blend the plot line into the new abilities and the new gameplay for the new series.
Definitely, yeah. So now one of the characters that you do come across in the game is your partner. His name is Dogi. Or Doji, or I don't know. I always called him Dogi.
I called him Dogi too.
Right. And you really kind of don't see him that much as you do in the later games like Ys 3. He's kind of like your companion. He's kind of like the sidekick, if you will. He's like Robin, Batman to Robin.
Right. You don't actually get to play as him until like Ys 7 or something.
Some of the
like
later
that.
games, right. But apparently Dogi gets the name Rock Crusher, or that's his nickname in this series.
Sweet.
It's either Rock Crusher or Wall. I think it's Wall Crusher, actually, because then at least every single game he crushes a wall.
Cool. He's a big dude.
He is. He's like a stocky, tough, strong, big dude.
Blue hair.
So,
So you got the red hair and the blue hair. They're very easy to tell apart when you're little sprites running around on a map.
I feel like if I was to cosplay as anybody, I would probably pick him.
And you could just bring a wall and crush it.
Yeah. I'll just like walk around with like styrofoam walls and just be like, "Hey, you! I'm Dogi." Punch out some walls.
Perfect.
So, all right, let's move into our next game. This is Ys 3, Wanderers from Ys. First came out on the PC 8801 and 9801 in 1989, and the soundtrack for that was by Meiko Ishikawa. The TurboGrafx 16 PSG version was by Kiita Hoshi, and the Super NES version was released in 1992. That's by Mishiharu Hasuya, Masaaki Harada, and Osamu Kasai. And I believe also we spoke about Ryo Yonemutsu as well, and he's in there too somewhere.
He arranged the Red Book Audio soundtrack for the TurboGrafx. So the TurboGrafx 16 CD version had both PSG, normal chiptune audio, and it had CD audio. Ryo Yonemitsu did the CD audio, and then Keita Hoshi did the chiptune version, which we'll hear from in a little bit.
Yeah, this is where things really start to get hairy as far as the music goes, because now we're bumping up to 16-bit as far as, we were with the TurboGrafx re-releases and the reimaginings of the original PC-88 games, but now we're jumping into Super NES, Genesis, like that whole era as well. So you're gonna hear some stuff and it's gonna be interesting.
Exactly.
It's gonna make you want to bump and grind.
Speaking of which, so this is my favorite song from the Ys 3 soundtrack. Not necessarily my favorite version of the song, but it's a version that I was just introduced to in kind of researching the show, and I did really like it. So this is the chiptune TurboGrafx CD version of Trading Town of Redmont from Ys 3, arranged by Keita Hoshi, originally composed by Meiko Ishikawa. Alright, that was the Trading Town of Redmont from the TurboGrafx CD version of Ys 3, Wanderers from Ys, originally composed by Meiko Ishikawa and arranged by Keita Hoshi for the TurboGrafx 16. Like I said before, this is like my favorite track from the Ys 3 soundtrack. I love that melody. It's so peaceful and so calming.
Definitely.
The SNES version is the first version that I heard. Of course, we just talked about that at the beginning. That's really the only version of the game that I'm fully familiar with.
Sure.
And I like the FM versions of this. Like I've heard the X68000 version and I've heard the Genesis version, and they're good, but I don't like them as much as the Super Nintendo version. But then I heard this and I just felt like maybe use a little more percussion, but the tones were just so rich. It really kind of fit very well with the tone that the music is trying to convey. Those bell tones sound a lot like the samples that are on the Super Nintendo version. And then I like the structure of the song. Like, it kind of repeats fully twice, and then it goes into this little kind of heroic ditty at the end before it loops back into that melody again. And you hear this song a lot during the game, because Redmont is the only town in the whole game. You're always kind of coming back to Redmont, going off on a mission, coming back there again. So every time you come back to this town,
it's kind of like the world hub.
Yeah, you hear the same music, and it just, even if you don't like it too much at first, it just grows on you because you hear it so much. I never got tired of listening to it when I was playing the SNES version.
Yeah.
So what'd you think of this one compared to, I know you're familiar with the Super Nintendo version.
Yeah, very familiar with the Super NES version, but this version's kind of new to me. Actually, this entire game on any platform other than the Super NES is very new to me, other than the remake Oath and Felghana, which will, if we do like a part 2...
We played a little bit in a Same Song, Different System.
Right, we did, yeah. And the music in that is just fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that. And I love the fact that if you play in Oath and Felghana, you could change the music to be the I believe it's the PC-88 version or the Sharp X68000 version, which is really cool.
Yeah, have you ever seen footage of the X68000 version of this game? Dude, it is so weird looking.
Really?
It's like the graphics are like kind of digitized. The animation's really bizarre, and then when you go into towns and you talk to people, they're like, how do I explain this the best? You Road Rash 3D, on the 3DO or the Saturn.
Right.
You know how like graphics are like they're like pictures of people, but like different features are kind of like stretched out or something. That's how all the people look in the X68000 version of Ys 3. It's such a weird looking version of this game. It's so far beyond like the standard anime characters that you have in all the other versions. So I have no idea why they decided to do that on the X68000.
That's pretty strange.
It's worth like looking at some footage on YouTube because it's so strange looking.
That's weird. Yeah, as far as the town of Redmond, I spent quite a lot of time in this town, kind of talking to all the townspeople. This is the first place that you kind of show up at, which we'll talk a little bit more about the story in just a little bit. For the composers, we're kind of going to jump around here. The Super NES arrangers were Mishiharu Hasuya, Masaaki Harada, and Osamu Kasai. For Mishiharu Hasuya, they were the Japanese composer, sound designer, and programmer who worked for Tecmo, Victokai, and Advanced Communication Company. And for Tecmo, they wrote the music for games such as Solomon's Key, Mighty Bomb Jack, and Rygar. For Victokai, they wrote the music for Golgo 13, and also Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which anyone who's an AVGN fan knows them, knows that game. Also wrote a sound driver for them that was used on most of their NES titles, so pretty cool.
So this Advanced Communication Company was basically the company that Falcom hired on to do a lot of the ports for the Nintendo consoles. So they did the ports for the Famicom for Ys 1 and 2, and they did the port onto the Super Nintendo version.
I thought the game was published for the Super NES version by Sammy, wasn't it?
Published by Sammy, but developed by Advanced Communication. In tandem with Falcom.
With Falcom, right. Yeah, Falcom kind of are like the rights owners when it comes to these games, and then regarding the development, they kind of hand it off sometimes to companies that they hire.
Well, they'll make like the original version of the game, so they'll do it on the PC-88 or the PC-98, and then kind of license the game out to other developers for other ports.
It's funny if they kept doing that. So like, can you picture like the newest one, Ys 8, like being like they make like a PC-88 version of it?
That would be awesome.
Yeah, and then they're like, I don't know, here, what's the new
PS4?
What's the new system? Like the PlayStation, Nintendo 5, Switch.
Yuzo Koshiro still makes music on the PC-88, so I wouldn't put it past Falcom.
I definitely wouldn't. No, that's true. So, what about some of the other composers?
Masaaki Harada was a former employee of Advanced Communications Company as well. He handled most of the ports like we were just talking about from the Ys series to the NES and the SNES, arranging the NES versions of Ys 1, 2, and 3. But as far as original compositions, he's worked on games like Last Armageddon.
We played that in the Famicom episode.
Yes, that was that RPG that you were a monster fighting other monsters. Yeah.
That was the one that Niko was like, this is a great game. No clue what's going on.
He also did Mecha Robot Golf, which is a big...
Never played that.
Yeah, that's got a really good soundtrack. Josh from VGM Jukebox talks about that game a lot on the VGM Jukebox. And then also Dino Wars. His last known title was an audio director at Konami. But maybe he's working on pachinko machines now.
Yeah, probably.
Osamu Kasai worked in tandem with Harada on nearly all of his projects. He's also a game designer and programmer. He was a audio director at Konami alongside Harada. Now, Keita Hoshi, who was the arranger for this particular track that we're listening to, he was an employee at Hudson Soft. He mainly did sound programming and directing. He arranged all the PSG tracks for the TurboGrafx CD version of Ys 3. After the TurboGrafx 16 days were over, and Hudson Soft moved on to other consoles, he was an audio programmer and director on the Bloody Roar and the Mario Party series, which are both developed by Hudson Soft.
Right.
He's got credits on Mario Party 4 through 8, and then also worked on Mario Party Advance and Mario Party DS. The last credit I could find from him was from 2008, which was Tetris Party on the Wii. So he basically hung on, basically went down with the sinking Hudson Soft ship.
Yeah,
and
probably got laid off when Konami bought him out.
Yeah, well, like Kasai and Harada ended up audio directors at Konami, so they probably either jumped over when they found out that Hudson was going to be purchased by Konami, So I'm sure Hoshi probably did the same thing. So, who knows what they're up to nowadays. But, this was the beginning of their careers.
Right.
And, to be working on a game that was this esteemed even far back then, these guys kind of had an upward trajectory. They were going to be successful because you don't just get the series because you're the one available. You get it because you're a highly skilled composer and you can handle it.
You're worthy.
Right.
We're not worthy. So let's listen to the next track. This one is my pick. This is Welcome, and it's basically the store music that you hear in the town. And this came out on the Super NES in 1992. This is a really weird but really awesome version of this track. Welcome back. That was Welcome.
Welcome.
Super NES 1992 is the year of release. This track is just, you know what it is that really kind of stands out to me with this track? Aside from the just fantastic arrangement, I really prefer this version to any other version.
Agreed.
And that's
It's
weird.
kind of a controversial opinion to have.
Yeah.
But I really feel like the instrumentation was perfect for the SNES version. I mean, maybe it's just because it's the version that we both heard first.
Possibly. Nostalgia goggles.
But even being like an FM fanatic like myself, to still prefer this version, to me it's like more of an objective opinion. I just feel like there's more diversity between the sounds. You get those hi-hats and a little bit more of that percussion going on that you don't have in like the Genesis version. You get a little bit more of that in like the X68000 version.
Yeah, and I think that's what it was trying to mirror is the X68000 version with the drums and bass specifically. Just really snappy and tight sounding. But as far as those lead lines, just like way up there. There's some tracks in this. One of the most famous tracks is Ilvern Ruins, I think it's called.
We're gonna hear that next for the Genesis.
Yes. And that track on the Super NES gets these like insanely high-pitched notes.
Yep. That
it's just, to anybody else it sounds like somebody stepped on a cat. But to me it's the iconic version of that song.
Yeah.
So, but this song in particular, this is the only version that I could find of the song where the lead line kind of drifts off and does this different thing, this different sound to it, where you've got the main melody, the da 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 da, and then it kind of separates and it goes into this da 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 da.
Yeah.
Da da. It's like
you got a whole other melody going underneath that da 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 da, and it almost sounds like "Take on Me" by Aha.
Yeah.
But they blend perfectly together, and it just sounds like almost like a round, like two melodies being played at different times that kind of like blend perfectly together.
Yeah, they work really well. They just sound great together, even though they're very different sounding.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but that da 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 da, it's always stuck out to me in my head. And then right before the loop, it's just da 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 da, and it kicks right back into the loop, and it's just it feels like this is the version that it should have been, but on every other version that I've listened to for this song, it completely doesn't have that. Even in the remake on Oath and Felghana, it doesn't have that, which is strange, but I don't know, they were going with a different arrangement.
Yeah, well, I think they were basing those tracks in Oath and Felghana off of the original tracks.
Right.
And the SNES version had some flourishes in it that a lot of the other FM-based tracks didn't.
Same with the Genesis version, too.
Yes, when you got those remakes, you didn't get those little flourishes that we're used to, thinking that it's the original version of the song. Right. So it's interesting how that works out. So Ys 3 takes place 3 years after the stories of Ys 1 and 2. Adol and his friend Dogi going through town, they find this psychic.
Which, speaking, not to interrupt, but speaking of this, these cutscenes in the Super NES, especially that early in the Super NES,
they were great.
They were just I was blown away, I remember,
and
as a
kid. And much better than the other games, too.
Yeah.
The Genesis version is like very...
It's just like pictures and no movement.
And it kind of glosses over. Like it's almost a different introductory story on the SNES. It's more detailed.
Yeah. Not only is it animated, but there's also music that's not in any of the games.
Right,
Even the TurboGrafx version.
Yeah, and they're situationally based. So different things will happen. You get these little stingers coming in. Like moments of tension that just like work really, really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going through this town. They meet this fortune teller. The fortune teller's like, hey, I'll read your fortune. She does, and the crystal ball explodes.
Right.
She's like, something really bad is going to happen. All I can tell you is that you need to go to Redmont. And Dogi's like, dude, that's my hometown. He's like, now I'm a little bit worried.
I don't think he said that. I don't think he turned to Adol.
He did in my version.
He was like, dude, that's my hometown, bro.
This is the PixelTunes translation.
Right.
The fan translation. So they head off towards Redmont. They see this girl being attacked by a monster. They rescue her. It's Elena, which is Dogi's like friend from like 10 years back before he left the town. And then they meet all the denizens of the town, and they kind of learn that the king is looking for these 4 statues that sealed the demon away a long time ago, and they're falling into the hands of people who want to bring the demon back. So as he goes around collecting these statues, different things happen, and it's kind of like a struggle. Like the bad guys will get the statue, and he has to get it back, and then another statue will get stolen, and so throughout the game, you're kind of chasing these statues and learning about people that are good that might end up being bad, and there's a lot of twists and turns. It's a very riveting story.
Yeah.
It has a very, very cool, very suspenseful ending where like different lives hang in the balance and characters that you become very, very attached to. I don't want to spoil it too much because this is like the first Ys game that really has a very cohesive, very solid storyline to it. Where Ys 1 and 2, you're kind of like, you're getting the gist of the story as you go through, but it's just dialogue boxes and people aren't very emotive. So this is one that...
Spoilers, Dogi crushes a wall.
At one point or another.
Yeah.
But this is the one where like you should either go play the Super Nintendo version of Ys 3 or Oath and Felghana if you want to get... Oath and Felghana I think even has some extra elements to the storyline. They expand upon it a little bit.
It does, and it has really fantastic music that you can choose the 3 different types, but it also has voice acting in it as well, which is really cool. Yep. And it doesn't have the which we'll talk more about later on. The gameplay is a little bit different in Oath and Felghana. In my opinion, it's more improved.
It plays more like a Zelda clone. This one, we didn't even touch on this yet, but this is the first game that's actually side-scrolling, kind of almost like a very early Metroidvania style game. But we'll touch on that a little bit after the next track. So the next track we got coming up is a pick from me. It's that song you were just talking about, The Ruins of Ilverns. This came out on the Genesis version in 1991. Let's give it a listen. Oh man, that was Ruins of Ilverns from Ys 3 Wanderers from Ys. That was the Genesis port, came out in 1991. Goodness gracious. I mean, I think that's the reason why I picked this one from the Genesis version is because it just, if there's anything that comes close to my appreciation for the SNES version of the soundtrack, this one really takes advantage of the FM because it's got that hard rock sound and it just gets like right before the loop, like that really hard rockin', harmonizing leads. Da, 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 da. It just sounds so good. You get that FM galloping bass.
Yeah.
This one, I think, matches the strengths of the YM2612 and that Sega PSG the best out of all the other tracks from this OST. What do you think, Mike? I know.
Yeah.
Do you prefer the SNES version or the Genesis version better?
I still like the Super NES version better.
Yeah.
But it's funny. The more I listen to this version, the more I like it. I think what really kind of is a downer on this version is that beginning. It's just so flat sounding.
Yep.
You know, you've got the wah, 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 wah,
Yeah.
and it's the Genesis trying so hard to have these really like high-pitched, like wailing melodies that they just can't hit.
And the crazy thing is that these songs were originally written for an FM chip.
Right, which blows my mind.
Yeah, I don't
get it.
I don't get it either.
I don't underget it.
You know, Meiko Ishikawa is a genius composer. She was able to rock those FM chips really hard. I don't know. I wish I could go back in time and like rent the Genesis version of this game first instead of the SNES version and like figure out if I would have the same reaction that I do to the SNES soundtrack.
That's what you do to go back in time? You wouldn't like kill Hitler or like...
Maybe I take a detour and kill Hitler.
Right.
I don't know. But...
Okay.
Just as an experiment, you know what I mean.
You'd kill Hitler, then go forward like
then I would
40 years
the
or
Genesis version.
50 years.
If the Genesis even existed, if Hitler was killed.
Right,
you know?
right.
Maybe the PC-98 would have come out in the US and we all would have been happy.
The problem is you'd have to meet your future, or your past self as your future self. And so you would just have this tall, hairy man coming up to your childhood self and being like, play the Genesis version, and then you just disappear.
That's not true, dude. I could just pull like a Bill and Ted Excellent Adventure time loop, or I would just rent the SNES version so that only the Genesis version would be on the shelf.
Okay.
And then little me would come in, not knowing any better, and just be like, oh, I'll get the Genesis version. So...
Okay.
You know.
Respectable.
Who knows? Anyways, what I'm trying to say is, it's very hard for me to listen to any other version of the soundtrack without hearing the differences from the SNES version and saying to myself, that's wrong. And it's not wrong, it's just different.
It's just different. Yeah. Right, I agree. I actually really like the flourishes towards the end, the differences. You know, you've got that and then it kicks into the loop.
Yeah, which is a little bit different than the SNES version.
Right.
It's in the right channel. It's a little bell tone kind of a lead that doesn't appear in the version that I'm used to.
And I like how there's a lot of really cool stereo panning in this version too. I mean, they typically did that quite a bit with the later games, so it's nice to see that they kind of featured that here. And I think in the Super NES version they have that a bit.
A little bit. And there's some, like I said, in the Super Nintendo version, there's some more flourishes. There's like two notes where there's one in this version, like that the beginning of that lead melody is a little more simplified. It's like there's less notes. There's like, you know, they're all quarter notes instead of eighth notes.
It's twarmpy.
Twarpy?
Twarmpy.
Farty?
No,
twarmpy.
Twarmpy. Twarm. There's like it's like NMPY, like twarmpy.
Okay.
That's what it is. It's twarmpy.
I'll take your word for it. I'm gonna look that up on Urban Dictionary and find out what a twarmp is.
I'm gonna add that on Urban Dictionary. The definition would be like, it's what Ys 3 sounds like on the Genesis.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. All right. Just a little bit on the gameplay. I talked a little bit about it last break, but again, this is the only game in the series where it's a side-scrolling adventure game. I guess you can liken it a little bit to like Zelda 2 on the NES.
That makes sense.
Or
because the first two are top-down.
Yeah, like or like the Castlevania 2, that kind of a game with more RPG elements. You have hit points, which drain almost instantly at the beginning of the game.
Yes, they do. You pretty much have to...
literally, like, you go from the town, you go into this cave, there are bats in the cave, the bats kill you.
Right.
You go back to the cave, the bats kill you again.
Right. You have to save... like right when you get into the cave. Right. That's the trick.
There's no invincibility after you get hit.
Right.
So if you get hit and the enemy is coming towards you, you just jump back a little bit, but it's just like bump, 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 and your energy is just going bump, 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 bump down in the other direction, and you just die. It's insane.
Rough. You pretty much have to grind at the very beginning of the game just to get a little bit of extra life.
Just by picking your hits, like going in, slicing, running away. Yeah. There's no more bump system, so you've actually got to swing your sword at the guys.
My favorite on the Super NES version is when you're attacking up, and if you hold the button down, he's just like stabbing the air super fast, and it's like you have a turbo button being held, but you don't.
Yeah.
So it just looks really goofy because he's just like stabbing like...
He's really trying to get those bats.
Right. Oh, it's pretty funny.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
There is a magic system in this game as well, except that now they are magic rings instead of magic wands, which they were in Ys 2. And so now you have like ring points instead of magic points. But it pretty much operates the same way. You get certain rings for different spells, and then you have magic points that drain as you use your magic.
So basically what you're saying is you previously were all about the bumping and grinding, but now that you've had your fun, now you're going to kind of settle down, move into this game. So
if you're down with it, put a ring on it.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, that, or I was going to say, you put a ring on your digit, so that way you have magic in the bedroom. We're still talking about Ys?
We're still talking about Ys. Okay. At least I am.
We're still talking about Ys.
Let's ease on down to Ys 4, why don't we?
Yes, Ys 4, Mask of the Sun, also known as Ys 4, The Dawn of Ys. 2 different releases. Mask of the Sun came out on Super Famicom on the 1993 year of release. Yoshiaki Kubodera, Masanori Hikichi, Miyoko Takaoka, Naoyuki Ito, Tomohiro Endo, and Hiro Tengenji. Those were the composers for Mask of the Sun. Dawn of Ys, which released on the PC Engine CD in 1993, composed by Atsushi Shirakawa, Naoki Kaneda, Takahiro Tsunashima, and Masaru Nakajima.
Jeez, that's like Super Smash Brothers echelon composing teams here.
So let's go ahead and give a listen to our first track, which is A Great Ordeal. This is the PC Engine CD version, which came out in 1993. Someone's doing some shopping at your local video game store. But who could it be? It's Nick Carney, unpopular opinion gamer.
Welcome to Retro Time Games. Oh, it's you.
That's right, Nick Carney here. Hoping to do some chatting about games and shopping. Mostly chatting about games, though. Hello, shopkeep. What do you here?
What?
Oh, that. Just a line I like to say from Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Such a good game.
Great. Well, okay, here's the deal. You have a time limit of 30 minutes before you either have to purchase something or you get out.
On whose authority is this?
The boss.
And who might that be?
That would be me.
Oh, okay. So, do you have the newest edition of the Ys series? Ys 8. Lacrimosa of Dana? Preferably for the PlayStation 4?
I'm sorry, what did you call it?
Ys?
No, dude, we don't have that one.
Really? Well then, what is that pile of games right behind you labeled Ys 8? Lacrimosa of Dana?
Oh, that game! Yeah, we have Ys 8. What?
I mean, you work at a game store and called it Ys? Do you even play video games?
Dude, what are you talking about? The game is pronounced Ys.
Actually, no, it's pronounced Ys. This guy Mike Tendo did a whole video on it and everything. Here, let me show you.
A few minutes later. Also, the word doesn't change spelling, so the act of Anglicization would not make it wise, so it remains based on its foreign pronunciation as originally intended. So, now that we've cleared up how to say ease, how did you pronounce it beforehand? Are you planning on changing how you say it? What's your...
See? Now you know how to pronounce it.
Oh, yeah, I guess I do, don't I? Thanks.
No problem. Happy to help.
Okay, so do you want to buy it?
No thanks. I already pre-ordered the limited edition of it directly from the publishers. It comes with so many goodies.
Then why would you ask if we have it in stock?
Just checking. Anyways, do you like the FM Towns Marty?
Damn you, Nick Carney, unpopular opinion gamer! Damn you!
Well, that was a waste of time. But what did you expect from...
Nick Carney, unpopular opinion gamer!
Welcome back. That was Ys 4, Dawn of Ys, and that came out on the PC Engine CD in 1993, and again, composed by Atsushi Shirakawa, Naoki Kaneda, Takahiro Tsunashima, and Masaru Nakajima. The track was called A Great Ordeal.
It was a great ordeal.
Yes, it was. So we also can't forget to mention the fact that this has obviously been ripped from, well, my metalhead friends will know that this is pretty much a straight-up copy of Yngwie Malmsteen's Far Beyond the Sun, which also was used for Dwelling of Doom. So all the parts that they didn't, like the da-da-da-da, 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 dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, like that whole part is the beginning to Far Beyond the Sun.
Wow.
The whole thing.
That's crazy.
And then when it loops back in the that is Far Beyond the Sun. That's the whole track.
That's insane.
Yeah. So it's really funny that both Dwelling of Doom for Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, and that
very influential on these composers.
Hey man.
I mean, I was not knowing that, not being familiar with a lot of Malmsteen's work, I was getting kind of like a Trans-Siberian Orchestra vibe.
Yep.
You know, very orchestral mixed with like screamy guitars.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that kind of almost square wave lead synth solo towards like the middle, the last three quarters
the one that's
of it.
like da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That sounded kind of like Castlevania too.
Yeah, definitely.
But I like when that happens. Like when you have an 8 or 16-bit game with a CD soundtrack, I like when you have like lead live instrumentation, but more of kind of like a chiptune lead. I feel like it's a really good blend that kind of doesn't take you out of the game too much. You kind of have that chiptune feel, but with CD audio in the background.
Yeah, or like orchestral music with chiptune kind of spread out throughout.
Like I remember like the early Sega CD games that Spencer Nilsson did. They would have like live guitars, but then they would have like real FM bass and FM sweeps in the background. It was a great blend of Genesis music and live stuff. So that kind of took me back to those kind of soundtracks that you get back in the day. But that said, such a big difference in production quality,
definitely,
and instrumentation from like the first Ys games, where it was just like, you know, Yonemitsu with like a high quality sampler. Now you've got a full band, you've got crazy stuff going on, huge orchestrated backgrounds with live drum kits, and it's just an entirely different ballgame when you're talking about this soundtrack.
I agree. And, you know, they definitely put their heart and soul into the music. It's very clear that the composers of these games, of all the series games, just really focus very strongly on delivering top-notch music. It's one of the reasons why there's also so many arrangements of these that are actually released by Falcom.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to see, you know, the fact that video game music isn't dying even in this day and age with, you know, all the big booming orchestral soundtracks that sound like movie soundtracks. There's a bigger focus nowadays on making it seem more like a movie, or even like throwing in like kind of like all the trailers for video games. They don't have video game music in them. They just have like
some sort of dubstep thing.
Yeah, or like 70s rock, you know, trying to like capture that whole Guardians of the Galaxy thing.
Yeah.
And so you don't really see that as much in a game series like Ys because it is so niche. So, you know.
It's funny, I was almost wondering, like just briefly wondered if the game didn't come out in like Europe or North America because of the direct ripoff of Yngwie Malmsteen stuff. But then I realized Malmsteen was huge in Japan.
He was huge in Japan,
So people who were playing this game would probably, you know, not all of them, but most of them would probably say, hey, that sounds really familiar. But I don't know what the copyright laws were like in Japan back then, so I don't know if there was any sort of retaliation Malmsteen could have even...
I don't think so. Yeah. I mean, you know, we covered a lot of that on the episode that we did, what was that, like episode 4?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Sound-alikes.
Yeah, the sound-alikes episode, the pop music sound-alikes. So, no, I don't think so. But I do think that just the games weren't selling very well. I don't think that Wanderers from Ys sold well. It was kind of like their way of dipping their toes into the American market to see if it would do well, and it didn't, probably. So they were like, all right, we're just going to release this in Japan, and that's what they did.
Yeah.
So they released it on the PC Engine CD, which is the version that we just heard. And the composers on that one, Tsushi Shirakawa, was the composer on Popful Mail, worked on a bunch of the Xanadu series, which we talked about earlier, Legend of Xanadu 1 and 2, Legend of Heroes 3 and 4, Ys 5, and Brandish 2, 3, and 4. Naoki Kaneda worked on pretty much very similar to that previous composer, as well as Takahiro Tsunoshima. Also worked on pretty much all those games. Where we start to get a little bit more differences is with Masaru Nakajima, who's only credited online for art design for Fantastic Journey and International Superstar Soccer Deluxe. So not even really credited that often with the Ys series, but somehow still on the Falcom sound team.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I mean, they were probably all part of JDK, and a lot of those guys worked together. You know, that was another in-house band that was kind of similar to Zuntata or the Sega Sound Team band, SST band. Yeah, you know, you would see a lot of these guys credited oftentimes always on the same games, which is great because then they got a working relationship, and I think that's one of the reasons why the music was so awesome, because
definitely,
you know, they knew the strengths and weaknesses of each other, and they were able to make fantastic music together.
Definitely. The composers on Mask of the Sun for the Super Famicom version of this game, which came out in 1993, which we're going to hear from next, were Yoshiaki Kubodera, who worked on Steel Empire for the Genesis, Evo, I think it's called The Search for Eden or something like that. That's it's the one where you play as the fish and you gotta like level up.
It was like a shooter and you like turn into different creatures.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a shooter, but yeah, that's
like that.
Yeah, something like that. Rumble Roses, and then Masanori Hikichi worked on Terranigma, Grand Stream Saga, Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair, and Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc.
I think we talked about him on our Quintet episode.
Yeah. I believe so. Miyoko Takaoka worked on Jet Ion GP, Alchemist, Marie and Ellie Futare no Atelier, which I believe is a game in the Atelier series. Naoki Ito is only credited online for War Song, Tomohiro Endo worked on Majuo sound design on Virtua Fighter 2, Assault Suit Lanos 2, and Langrisser 3. Hold on, we're almost done. Masumi Takamoto, also credited as Hero Tengenji, mostly did programming on games like Dragon Warrior 3, Dragon Quest V, Lady Stalker, Shining Force, and the Alundra series. They were also credited as the sound manipulator on Ys 4, which is the game we're covering right now. They also did audio for Dragon Warrior 4, Tetris 2, and Bomb Bliss, Evo, which we talked about a little earlier, Feda, The Emblem of Justice, and Rally Challenge 2000.
Whew. Whew. Glad you're editing this break.
Yes. So let's get into your track.
Alright, so next up, I picked a track from the Super Famicom version of the game, Ys 4 Mask of the Sun. This is Minea Port, which came out on the Super Famicom in 1993. And we're back. That was Minea Port from the Super Famicom version of Ys 4, Ys 4 Mask of the Sun. Again, this is another town theme. I'm not familiar at all with Ys 4 at all, nor the soundtrack.
Yeah.
So as I was listening through it, this one really caught my ear, and then I realized it probably was because it sounds very similar to the Trading Town of Redmont theme from Ys 3, and I can guarantee you that whichever composer wrote this song based it off of the Trading Town of Redmont, because it even follows the same pattern. You get the whole song just about twice, and then you get this little kind of heroic fanfare at the end, and then it rolls back into the loop again. So it's the same song structure. It's just got a very, very nice flute melody, kind of a relaxing tone to it. I think it's a little more energetic than the Town of Redmont theme. You get that kind of galloping bass and dun 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 dun, and then at the end you get these kind of horn flourishes with that flute solo going on. It just sounds very, very refreshing, I think. And I'm figuring that the Minea Port probably happened somewhere in the middle of the game where you've been fighting these enemies and monsters, and then you end up in this port town, and you hear this music, and you're like, oh, I can finally breathe. I'm a little bit safe for a little while.
Right.
What'd you think of it?
No, I dig this track, but it sounds more to me like something that belongs in Tetris Attack.
I thought the same thing, too.
Yeah.
I was thinking Puyo Puyo, but same kind of concept.
Yeah, it has that very light-hearted, like fluffy kind of feel to it.
Like a level 1 puzzle track.
Yeah, and I think it's especially because of those synths in the beginning, the da 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 da. It's just very uplifting, but at the same time very relaxing, very soothing. So that really stood out to me as far as the track goes. But it also has those kind of stings that kind of go dun 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 dun, like staccato notes. So
yeah.
It was good. It's exactly what I would expect from a town-style song. So the last track that we'll play on the podcast sounds totally different than this, which is interesting because you get to see a different side of how they composed the tracks for this. They kind of didn't make every song sound the same as far as the style goes. So story-wise, regarding the timeline, this takes place 2 years after Ys 2, but prior to the events of Wanderers from Ys. And Adol Christin returns to Minea, or Minea, I don't know.
I've been calling it Minea.
Yeah.
So go with it.
Which is where Ys 1 began. He finds a message in a bottle from someone asking for help in Calcutta or Salcetta, so he decides to set sail for that location. Now, in Dawn of Ys, it's a little bit different. There's a lot more conversing with the townsfolk at the beginning of the game, whereas in Mask of the Sun, it's just pretty much you just set a course for Salcetta. Mask of the Sun is generally a lot more streamlined, and Dawn of Ys is considered the better of the two titles by most Ys fans.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because, it's a lot more elaborate of a game. But
yeah, it's almost like two different teams were given like the storyline and were told to make games based on that storyline, but they didn't communicate to each other what they were doing. So you got two different interpretations of that same storyline.
Yeah, and I think that's mostly because the Super Nintendo back in '93 was still pretty popular. So I kind of feel like they were like, all right, well, we don't want to completely abandon, the TurboGrafx, but at the same time, we want to make something for the Super Famicom because it is still popular in Japan. So they decided to, kind of make like a down port to the Super Famicom. So makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more streamlined. So a remake was made for the PS2 under development by Taito. I believe they also worked on one for Ys 3 as well, Wanderers from Ys.
Yeah, Taito had a little bit of involvement with some of the Ys titles.
However, the game was later remade into Memories of Salcetta for the PS Vita, which is where Adol wakes up and has amnesia.
Dun, dun, dun.
Spoilers. So that one came out fairly recently, actually. That was the one that came out right before Ys 8. And that's one that I kind of don't really have any experience with.
Yeah.
Pretty much this whole game I don't really have that much experience with otherwise.
Yeah, Oath and Felghana and Memories of Salcetta are kind of like the rebooted timeline, almost. They're enhanced versions of those two games.
Yeah, and then there's even like Ys Origins, which we won't even get into this time around.
There's a lot of Ys content out there. I mean, if you count the soundtracks that came out on all the ports, all of the remakes, all of the arrangement CDs, there's like hundreds and hundreds of hours of Ys music to listen to.
Yes.
It's like you could just have a whole podcast series. We can fill up 96 episodes on Ys music, I'm sure.
Definitely.
I'm sure most people would love that. You and I would be tearing our hair out. But.
Yes, agreed. There's only so much Ys I can take.
All right, so speaking of which, let's wrap up this show. What's the last track of the day?
Yes, our last track is Field, and this is a Super Famicom version. This is a real rocker to end on. 1993 was the year of release, and let's go out with a bang. Or with a Field in this case. Alright, welcome back. That was our final track of the podcast. Field is the name of the track. Super Famicom was the game system of release, and 1993 was the year of release. I just love those Mega Man X guitars that they kind of introduced.
Yeah.
I was digging that.
Not so much the high ones for me. Of course, we all know about my opinion on the Mega Man X guitars. But those more like low, like bass tones, very, very cool stuff.
Yeah.
Very, very different from the track that we played earlier, Minea Port. That had, that very kind of town feel, and this one has like almost like you were talking about, the first one had a puzzle feel. This one to me has like a shoot 'em up feel.
Okay.
Or like kind of like a driving at night through a city kind of feel to it. And that just kind of proves like what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, where these soundtracks have so much variety to them. And a lot of different composers worked on the Super Famicom version, so I'm sure the different composers all played to their strengths and composed different kinds of music, depending on what they were working on. So.
Yeah. No, I think that they did a really good job with this track. And, you know, it's interesting because as I was going through the tracks for this, I'd actually picked a totally different track, and I ended up accidentally picking an arranged version of the track and of a different track. And you were like, you can't pick that one, it's an arranged version. So I was like, all right, no problem. So I'm, kind of cruising the Super Famicom version. I hear this song, and immediately those guitars stand out to me because even though they're Mega Man X based, like they definitely were using probably the same sound driver or sound system that the Capcom composers were using, but they just sound really gritty and tough sounding. That like pull on the strings, it's just like really good.
Yeah. Well, a different composing team, different sound director. So, the same instrument set with a completely different set of people around it, makes for a very different sounding song. And, sometimes when you have like that same kind of instrument set, you can't even realize it until like you hear that one instrument. You're like, oh, I recognize that instrument.
Yep.
And then suddenly you hear all the other instruments in kind of like relation to that instrument. You're like, holy cow, this is the same instrument set. It's interesting how that works out.
So gameplay wise, this game is both in Dawn of Ys and Mask of the Sun. The gameplay returns to the more top-down bump style perspective from Ys 1 and 2. This also, again, like I said, brings a return for the bump style gameplay where you would run into the enemies to cause damage. From what I understand, a lot of hardcore Ys fans really disliked Wanderers from Ys because it strayed from the typical style that the rest of the games were in.
That gameplay style hasn't been revisited since, so...
Yeah, I guess, I would say that the newer games and the remakes of those games...
They're like 2.5D?
Yeah, they're more isometric style, so they kind of take a bit of the best of both worlds.
Right.
But you don't bump into the enemies anymore. You don't bump and grind.
Yeah, no, it's all attack.
It's all...
Attack. It's more like a traditional, like, Secret of Mana, I think, would probably be the best way I can kind of describe that combat style.
Or like Zelda.
Yeah, RPG elements
Much
with
more like Zelda.
real-time action.
Yep.
And fantastic to boot. Graphics are great. The translations are amazing. They're very, very well done games, and definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, the publishing company that worked on the translations of the Ys series up until this newest one, Ys 8, was Xseed. And Xseed, they've been known to take a lot of pride in making sure that the translations are solid. There's a lot of fans that are worried about Ys 8 that the translation will not be as good, and apparently the NIS America is doing it, and they, from what I understand, they tend to be looked down upon from some people. I don't know. I don't really notice, to be honest. I don't speak Japanese, so I don't know the major differences. I'm one of those people that like, if a game makes sense in English, then I'm fine with it as long as it keeps the core understanding of what they're saying.
Yeah, I guess the expectation is to keep all the nuances of the Japanese version, but still kind of keep it culturally relevant.
Localized.
Right.
There's a difference between censoring and localization. I think a lot of fans somehow think that if something is localized for a more American or European audience, that it's being censored, and I don't think personally that that's the case.
It's just making it more understandable for a wider range. There are a lot of colloquialisms in Japan that would not make any sense whatsoever if it was directly translated into English, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So, words that rhyme or words that sound like each homonyms and synonyms that just don't translate to the Japanese language, and same, backwards. So you can't keep a direct translation right like that, which I think is why a lot of the older games, like the older Sega CD games and stuff, where people would just say nonsensical things, those were translations that were done just by people that are like, literally character for character writing English things out. And a really good translation team is going to take those concepts and bring them into an English language that people can understand and be familiar with, and still get that kind of sense of humor without needing to relearn some colloquialisms from a different language.
Yeah, the Wanderers from Ys on the PC Engine or TurboGrafx CD is pretty goofy.
Yeah.
Just all the audio and the dialogue is very goofy.
Plus, with a lot of the older games, you had to fit into memory, you know, your languages, and you can say a lot more and more limited characters with Japanese than you can in English. So a lot of times you had to kind of like truncate what you're trying to say into so many characters, and just, the translation just gets really botched for that.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that was our segment on Ys, at least the first 4 games. We'd love to hear what you think. I know a lot of you guys are Ys fans, Ys soundtrack fans. You can head over to facebook.com/groups/PixelTunesRadio. Comment on the show. Were there any games that you didn't know about that you want to check out? Any versions of the soundtrack you didn't hear before that you really like? Post some of your favorite Ys stuff in there as well, and we would love to hear it and give you our impressions too.
Yeah, definitely. And feel free to send us a comment on pixeltunesradio.com, where you can access all the previous episodes. You can also check us out on iTunes or Stitcher, where you can listen to all of our episodes.
All of our episodes.
Give us a review, give us a rating, let us know what you think of the podcast. You can also check us out at youtube.com/dongled, where you can watch or listen to a video portion or video version of the episode.
Exactly.
Just like moving pictures and stuff.
Yeah, slideshow.
Yeah, you can check out the rest of my channel as well.
And don't forget about Retro World Expo. Head to retroworldexpo.com if you want to grab tickets. If you have any questions that you want to ask us about the expo, feel free to contact us on Facebook or at pixeltunesradio@gmail.com.
Yep.
And we can let you know whatever you want to know, or at least direct you to the right people who will know the answers to that stuff. We'd love to see you and hang out with you at the show. That would be a great time.
Absolutely.
Also, don't forget to listen to my other podcast, Impulse Project, featuring music from the demo scene and the tracking community. You can head over to impulseproject.info to get more information on that.
That's true. So, episode 98 coming up.
Yeah, we're going to have a special guest with us, Cam of Worms, Cam Worma, our pal who's been on some other podcasts too recently.
Yes.
He will be with us. We will be doing a show about music from like intros and title screens of video games. We did epic endings with Cam Worma last time he was on, so we're kind of flipping the spectrum and doing intros instead of endings this time, so that should be a fun romp.
That's right. All right, well, we're out. I'm going to go play some Ys 8. Have fun. We'll see you in 2 weeks, boys and girls.
Peace out. See you in 2 weeks.